Imagine boarding a flight, excited for a new adventure, only to witness a shocking moment that leaves the entire cabin in stunned silence. A young girl, no older than 10, nervously steps onto the plane with her father, clutching a small bag. But before she even reaches her seat, a flight attendant approaches her with a cold glare. "You're holding up the line," the attendant snaps, her words dripping with impatience. The girl's face flushes red as she mutters an apology. Little does the flight attendant know, this isn't just any passenger. The girl's father, quietly observing the interaction, happens to own the very airline she works for. What happens next will not only change the flight attendant's perspective, but also leave every passenger on that plane speechless. Stay tuned as we unravel this incredible story of humility, justice, and unexpected twists. As the girl and her father made their way to their seats, the flight attendant's icy demeanor didn't go unnoticed by other passengers. A few exchanged uneasy glances, but no one said a word. The young girl, still visibly embarrassed, looked up at her father for reassurance. He smiled softly, his calm presence a sharp contrast to the tension in the air. What the attendant didn't realize was that this man wasn't just any businessman. He was the CEO and owner of the airline, a fact he chose to keep quiet for now. Settling into their seats in first class, the father observed the attendant as she continued her duties, her tone sharp and her patience thin with others as well. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating among the passengers. Who was this man? And why did he seem so composed after such a rude encounter? The answer would soon change everything. As the plane taxied down the runway, the tension lingered in the air. The father leaned back in his seat, watching the flight attendant as she interacted with other passengers. Her attitude remained consistent, quick, dismissive, and lacking the warmth expected of someone in her role. A man in coach asked for assistance with his overhead bag, only to be met with a curt, "Figure it out yourself, sir. We're about to take off." The murmurs among the passengers grew louder, but the attendant seemed unaware of the frustration bubbling around her. Meanwhile, the young girl quietly pulled out a book, trying to shake off the earlier humiliation. Her father gave her a reassuring nod, but remained deep in thought. In the cabin, a seasoned flight attendant approached the rude one, whispering something but was brushed off. Little did she know, the CEO's calm silence wasn't a sign of inaction, it was the calm before the storm. As the flight progressed, the flight attendant's behavior only grew worse. She snapped at another passenger for asking for water, rolled her eyes when a mother requested an extra blanket for her child, and loudly muttered complaints under her breath. The cabin was tense, with passengers exchanging uneasy glances, but no one dared to confront her. All the while, the father remained calm, his expression unreadable, but his watchful eyes missed nothing. The turning point came when the young girl hesitantly raised her hand to get the attendant's attention. She wanted to ask for a drink, her voice soft and polite. The attendant approached with an annoyed sigh. "What is it now?" she barked, making the girl shrink back into her seat. This time, the father's composure faltered just slightly. He leaned forward, speaking in a low voice. "Excuse me, but I think you're forgetting something." His words hung in the air, and the cabin grew eerily quiet. The flight attendant froze, her expression shifting from annoyance to confusion. "Forgetting something," she echoed, her tone defensive. The father met her gaze calmly, but there was a quiet authority in his voice as he replied, "Yes. Common courtesy, respect, maybe even the purpose of your job." His words were measured, but the weight of them sent a ripple through the cabin. Passengers began leaning in, sensing something big was about to happen. The attendant stiffened, her face a mix of anger and embarrassment. "Sir, I don't appreciate being spoken to like this," she snapped. Before she could say more, another flight attendant hurried over, clearly uneasy. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her voice nervous. The father stood slowly, towering over the first attendant. "Everything's fine for now, but you might want to inform the captain we'll need to discuss this once we land." The cryptic comment left everyone stunned. Who was this man, and what kind of authority did he hold? The first attendant's confidence began to crack as whispers spread through the cabin. As the plane landed and taxied to the gate, the tension in the cabin was palpable. The father had barely spoken another word, but his calm demeanor only added to the mystery. The flight attendant, now visibly uneasy, avoided his gaze, her earlier arrogance replaced with uncertainty. Passengers watched intently, their curiosity and anticipation growing by the second. Once the doors opened, the father gently took his daughter's hand and stood. He turned to the attendant, his voice firm but even. "I'll need you to come with me. It's time we have a proper discussion." Her face paled, but she reluctantly followed him, now fully aware she had underestimated him. The scene shifted to the gate, where an airline manager and a small team awaited their arrival. The manager's face lit up with recognition. "Mr. Crawford, we weren't expecting you today." Gasps echoed from passengers within earshot. The flight attendant's eyes widened as she realized the man she had insulted wasn't just a passenger. He was the CEO of the airline. "Let's step into my office," he said, his tone calm yet commanding. But just as everyone thought the story had reached its conclusion, the young girl spoke up. "Dad, can we talk to her first?" Her voice was steady, filled with unexpected grace. The father paused, then nodded, kneeling to his daughter's level. The girl turned to the flight attendant. "You hurt my feelings," she said softly, "but I think maybe you're just having a bad day. I forgive you." The cabin fell silent again, this time with a different kind of emotion. The attendant, overcome with guilt, stammered an apology, her bravado completely gone. The father gave her a long look before saying, "My daughter's kindness saved you today. Don't waste this second chance." As they walked away, the passengers erupted into applause, a moment of tension transformed into one of humility and redemption. As the father and daughter left the terminal, the weight of the moment lingered with everyone who had witnessed it. The flight attendant, now humbled, promised herself to approach her job and people with more empathy and patience moving forward. Passengers filed out, murmuring about the unexpected turn of events, many inspired by the young girl's grace and forgiveness. Outside, the girl looked up at her father. "Was that okay, Dad?" she asked quietly. He smiled and nodded, his pride evident. "You handled it perfectly." Sometimes, kindness is the strongest lesson of all. The experience left an impression on everyone involved. The passengers carried a renewed appreciation for humility and respect, and the airline team quickly made changes to ensure better training for staff. In the end, what could have been a moment of anger turned into a powerful reminder of how compassion and understanding can change everything.